Okay, hello calculus students. So this is my video for the pre-calculus quiz. And like I said during class, basically I'm gonna go through each of these problems, switch out problems for like a quick example problem. And then if you're gonna do the problems that are on the quiz that you missed, right? So you're gonna redo this one, for example, if you got it incorrect. Once you do all of them, you can make up to 80% of your missed points if you do them all correctly. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So number one, evaluate the function to find the corresponding f of x value for each value of x. So let's switch out my function. Let's say my function is not this, but it's 2x minus x squared. Let's say that's my function, right? And they gave me a table, and my functions were, sorry, my input was 7. Okay, so the whole concept with functions is that you put something as an input. So in this case, we put 7 as our x, right? 7's our x. That's my input. And then what I get is an output. My output is whatever my function is defined as. So in this case, it would be 2 times 7 minus 7 squared. So that's going to be, right? So I just basically plugged in the 7 for x. 7 goes in for x here, so that means 7 goes in for x there and for x there. So I get 2 times 7 minus 7 squared is equal to 14 minus 49 squared. Oh, sorry, not 49 squared, just minus 49. And that is negative 35, I believe. So negative 35, that would be my output. So essentially 7 is what I input for x. And then negative 35 is my output. And it gives me f of x, that's my output. Okay, hopefully that makes sense for number one. Let's now move on to number two. Evaluate the function f of x is equal to 4x squared minus x plus 5 for the following expressions. So I'm gonna edit this. Let's do 2x squared minus 3x plus 2. And instead of a plus 3, let's say x is equal to 2l plus, let's do minus 7. Okay, so again, this is the same idea. X is equal to 2l. Actually, I'm going to use a different 2b minus 7, different variable. So when x is equal to 2b minus 7, all I do is I plug 2b minus 7 in for x, right? Because x is equal to 2b minus 7, so I plug 2b minus 7 in for x. That means f of 2b minus 7, so f of 2b minus 7 would be equal to, remember I plug everything in that I would there for x, so instead of 2x squared, now it's 2 times 2b minus 7 squared minus 3 times 2b minus 7 plus 2. Now, actually, I'm fine to just leave it here because my whole point with these first two questions is I want to see that you know how functions work, right? So basically, when x is equal to 2b minus 7, 2b minus 7 replaces all the x's. So it replaces, in this case, 2b minus 7 replace that x, it replaces this x, it replaces this x, right? So that's why I have 2b minus 7 here instead of x and 2b minus 7 instead of x. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, find the slope of a line through each pair of points. If the slope is undefined, simply write undefined. So let's change this slope to, let's choose a pair of random points, 2, negative 7, 3, comma, 9. So those are, I just chose random points. So the slope of a line, remember, big picture, our slope, and this is important for all of calculus A, our slope is change in y over change in x, right? So change in y can be defined as y2 minus y1, or however you want to think about it, y2 minus y1, because remember, that's the difference in the y values, right? Change in y is simply difference. So I can find the difference in two y values by subtracting them. And to find the change in x, I simply find the difference in x. So I'm going to subtract x2 minus x1. So let's label our points. 2 comma -7, that's going to be x1, y1. That's my first pair of points. My second pair of points are x2 comma y2. So y2 minus y1, that's going to be 9 minus -7. So it's going to be 9 minus -7, divided by x2 minus x1. x2 is here, it's 3, so 3, and then minus, and x1 is 2, so 3 minus 2. So 9 minus -7, that's going to be 9 plus 7, right? So that's going to be 16. Divided by 3 minus 2 is 1, so my slope here is 16. So essentially, what this is saying is that my change in y over change in x is equal to 16, right? Or 16 over 1. So basically, for every 1 that I go over in x, I go up 16 in y. So the slope of my line would look something like this. It'd be very positive, right? My line would look something like this. Right? It'd be very positive. For every 1 I go over, I go 16 up. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, cool. I'm now going to move on to the second one. Instead of these pair of points, I'm going to choose, let's see, 8 comma 2 and 8 comma -3. Okay, I want to find the slope, right? So same idea, change in y over change in x. Okay, let's do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's see, x2 and y2 is this point. Also, one thing that I want to note is that it doesn't actually matter which one you choose as x1 or like which is the second pair of points or not. So I could replace them as this. So this could be x1 comma y1, x2 comma y2. It's going to be the same result. So y2 minus y1, that's going to be, y2 is 2, y1 is -3, so I'm going to subtract -3. Subtract -3. The denominator is going to be x2 minus x1, so x2 is 8, x1 is 8, so it's going to be 8 minus 8. So our numerator is 2 plus 3, so it's going to be 5. Our denominator is 8 minus 8, that's 0. What happens when I'm dividing by 0, and that's my slope? That means my slope is undefined, right? You can think of it as I go over 0 and I go up 5, right? Because that's the change in y over the change in x. But my question is, what does it mean to go over 0? That doesn't make any sense, right? I can't go 0 units in the x direction. That just means I stay where I am. So I'm staying at 0 and going up 5. That has just like an infinite slope. So in a sense, that slope is undefined. So if it's divided by 0, then it's undefined. Okay, number 4. Find the equation of the line which goes through the point 1 comma 2 and it's parallel to the line through the points 0 comma 1 and -2 comma 7. Okay, so before I get involved with the whole problem, all I know first is that I need to find the equation of the line. Right? I need to find the equation of some line. I don't know what line it is yet, but it's some line. And the method that we learned in our packet is to use point slope form to create a line. This is a very trusty form. If you go back to this, it's dependable. Point slope form goes like this: y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. This right here should be memorized. Memorize it. Okay, so let's see. Point slope form for this equation, remember I need two things, right? I need point slope form, I need a point, and I need a slope. Those are the two things I need. So for my point, well, I'm told my equation of the line goes through the point 1 comma 2. So I'm going to use that as my point, 1 comma 2. And for my slope, well, it doesn't tell me the slope of my line, right? So that's kind of annoying. Except I know that the line is parallel to the line that goes through these points, right? So if it's parallel to the line that goes through those points, that means it has the same slope as the line that goes through these points, right? Same slope. So how do I find the slope of these points? Well, we just did that. Our slope is going to be change in y over change in x, which is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So actually here, I'm going to change this point to 0, 3. So my point is 0, 3. And these points, instead of 0, 1 and negative 2, 7, let's try 3, 4, 1, 0. So if I label my points, let's see, x1, y1, x2, y2, y2 minus y1, that's going to be 0 minus 4. x2 minus x1, that's going to be 1 minus 3, so it's going to be negative 4 over negative 2, which is equal to positive 2. So my slope is positive 2. So I have my slope of 2 and my point of 0, 3. Well, let's apply it to now this point slope form, because we have all we need, right? I have my point, and I have my slope. Oops. And I have my slope. So my point here corresponds to x1, y1. So y minus y1, I'm going to leave this y. So it's going to be y minus y1, I decided was 3. Right, 3 here. Now we're going to look at m. What is m? M is our slope. M represents slope. We just calculate that as 2 times x minus x1. So it's going to be x minus x1. x1 is 0, so it's actually 0. So that's my equation. You can leave it like this. This is totally fine. It's in point slope form. If you want to simplify this, this would simply be, let's see, y is equal to 2x plus 3. That's in y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form. But anyway, yeah, this is a totally acceptable answer, and hopefully you saw the steps of how we got there. Okay, what is the slope of the secant line that intersects the graph? Let's erase this. Let's do square root of 4x plus 2 at x equals 1 and 7. Well, the slope of the secant line, the slope is always still the same. The slope is change in y over change in x. And you can think about it in this term if you want, y2 minus y1, because it's all the same concept, x2 minus x1. The question is now, what are our points? What are x1, y1, x2, and y2, right? Well, I have an x1 value here and an x2 value here. We just have to plug them in to find the corresponding y values, right? So if I plug in 1 into my function, I get my y1 would be equal to square root of 4 times 1 plus 2. That's equal to, y1 is equal to square root of 6, right? Square root of 6. Let's look at my y2. y2 happens when I plug in square root of 4 times 7 plus 2, right? Because I plug in my x2 this time. Right, so I'm plugging in my x values to get my y values. So I plugged in 7. Now, if I simplify that a bit, 4 times 7 is 28, plus 2 is 30. So it's going to be square root of 30. So y2 minus y1, that's going to be square root of 30 minus square root of 6, divided by x2 minus x1. x2 is 7 minus 1. So I'm going to do a quick calculation. And it happens to be that after I calculate this, my slope is equal to around 0.5. Right, so for every x I go over of 1, I go up 0.5. That would be my slope, around that. Hopefully you see the process of how we do that. Okay, I'm going to rewrite this to 1 over 2x squared plus 1 over 8x squared fifth root. Okay, so we're going to rewrite this using rational exponents. So the first thing is I'm going to make this x squared flip on top. right? When I flip a term with an exponent over a fraction sign, so anytime it flips over, it just switches signs. So now, instead of x squared, I flip it to the numerator, flip it over here, and I have x negative 2. Right, so the x squared flips to the top. Notice, however, that the 2 stays down here because the 2 is not impacted by the exponent, right? This 2 right here only impacts the x. It does not impact the other 2. So the other 2 stays down there, stays down here. Okay? Plus 1/8, fifth root of x squared. Well, my rule for fractional exponents is this number here goes in the denominator. So it's going to be x, and it's going to go in the denominator. And then this number here goes in the numerator. It's going to be 2/5. So that's the pattern. And the 1/8 stays the same. So remember, the root number here, that goes in the denominator. That goes lower. The exponent stays on top, which kind of makes sense. So it'd be 1/8 x to the 2/5 power. And remember, if this is still confusing to you, review your pre-calc notes. Okay, for this next one, I'm going to help you all in the sense that I'm going to rewrite this. The square root of x is really x to the first power. That makes sense, right? X to the first power is just x. And then square roots, this is unwritten, but there's a 2 out here. That's why it's called a square root. Okay, and minus 2x to minus 2/x, that's really x to the first power. So remember, when this is in the denominator, you can flip it over. Flip it over, and then think about what happens. What happens to this 1? Just to give you a hint, you flip it over, and you get 2x to the -1 power. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, 7, write each expression in radical form and positive exponents. So here we're kind of going in reverse, right? So x to the -1/2. Well, first, let's make it positive, and then we'll do radical, right? So x to the 1/2, oh, sorry, shoot. Let's see, x to the -5/2 minus x to the 3/4. Let's try it this way. So x to the -5/2, let's first make it positive. And the way I do that is by flipping it over a fraction, right? So I can imagine this as x to the -5/2 over 1, right? Because anything over 1 stays the same. But now it makes it clear what happens when I flip it over. I flip it over, so now it's in the denominator. And now instead of -5/2, remember it switches signs. So now it's +5/2. And I have the 1 on top, right? So I flip it over, a 1 stays on the top. And the 1 stays on top because it's like originally 1 times that. The 1 stays on top. But now it's positive instead of negative. Okay? Minus x 3/4. I'm going to leave it there and do the radicals myself the next step. Okay. So 1/x to the 5/2. How do I change this into radical form? So radical form is like this with the roots and stuff, right? Well, remember, the denominator, the 2 concerns the root number here. So it's really going to be 1/√2 of x. And then the 5, the numerator, that is the exponent. So x to the 5th. Right, so you can see how the 5 goes into that location. That's something, a pattern you just have to get used to. The 5 goes to here, and the 2 goes to there. Another thing to note is that this is a square root, right? So I don't really have to write the 2 because the default square root is 2. So I can just kind of leave it like that. This one, same idea, x to the 3/4. Remember, the 4 goes here, and the 3 would go here, and then the x goes there. Right, so the 3 goes in the exponent, the 4 goes in the root. That's our answer. So that would be our answer. Okay, let's Last couple problems. X plus 4 to the negative 1/2. Let's change this to 2x minus 2 to the negative 3/4. So let's first turn it positive, right? So I can rewrite it like that, right? So I'm going to flip this whole thing over, and now I have 2x minus 2 to the positive 3/4 rather than negative 3/4. Now, I hear maybe some of you might be asking, like, how come in this one the whole thing was flipped over, 2x minus 2, right? The whole thing got flipped over. Whereas when we look at a problem like, let's see, like this x squared, when I flipped it over, I left the 2 down here. The 2 stayed here in the bottom, right? And you might be like, why is that? Well, the reason here is because this is in parentheses. So this whole thing is to the negative 3/4 power, the whole parentheses part. Whereas in the previous question, only the x is basically in parentheses, right? The 2 is not in parentheses. It's not like that. It's not like this. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So the 2x minus 2 is now the denominator. It's to the positive 3/4. There's still a 1 on top. Now, remember our pattern again. So it's going to be to the 4th root of parentheses 2x minus 2. And now the 3 stays as an exponent, so it's going to be to the 3rd power. So that would be my final answer. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Find the value of y. So I'm going to think, let's say, log base 2 of 64 is equal to y. So log is simply a rearranged exponential equation. That's all logarithms are. It's just an equation that's been rearranged. So for example, let's leave this in logarithmic form. This is logarithmic, right? This is logarithmic. But let's move it over to an exponential form, right? They're the same equivalent expression, but now it's in a different form. So the form is this. I'm going to take the base, so the little number is going to be the little number 2. It's going to be 2. I'm going to make it large, and I'm going to put it to whatever the exponent is on the other side. So whatever's on the other side. So it would be y. 2 to the y. And this can be anything, right? It could be x, y, z. Then I would do 2 to the x, y, z power. You know, it could be anything here. But the idea here is it's y, so I'm going to do 2 to the y power is equal to 64. So it's equal to this number. So you can kind of visualize it rearranging. So I don't remember exactly what letters I use, but let's say it's A, B is equal to C. Then my exponential form is going to be A to the C power is equal to B, right? Those are my 2 different forms that I switch between. You can see what happens with the A, what happens with the C, what happens with the B. You just literally take 3 things and you rearrange them. Okay, so my question is now I still need to solve for y, right? Find the value of y. That's what it says here, find the value of y. Well, let's see, 2 to the what power is equal to 64? Let's see, 2 to the 3rd is 8. So it's going to be 2 to the 6th. 2 to the 6th is equal to 64. So in this case, y is equal to 6. Okay, hopefully that helped. If you have any questions, please still message me, email me, or text me. 224-425-6032 is my phone number. I sincerely hope this helped. Take your time with this. You definitely want these quiz points because I am not going to give 80% points back for all the rest of my quizzes. That's definitely not going to happen. So make sure you put your best effort into this. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have a good night, everyone. And don't forget to do your other homework.